بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I think this is the first time there's more men than women in a halaqa. MashaAllah. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce our two beloved guests here, alhamdulillah. So we have Dr. Hidayath Ansari. He is an applied scientist, and we also have Dr. Hamou, who is a software development manager. So they have a lot of experience with much of the AI that we're going to be talking about today, and you know, how to use it productively, how to use it as a Muslim, and as I mentioned, the opportunities and challenges that face us as well, inshallah. So with that being said, I'll kick it off now to Dr. Hidayath for him to kind of get us started, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum.
He didn't use AI to make his slides.
Definitely not. Okay.
We have donuts outside. If anyone wants donuts, inshallah.
And every night.
Right, bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I want to talk a little bit today about generative AI, and more specifically, because we had a talk on this last year, more specifically how we can use it beneficially, how we should not be using it, and then we'll talk in depth about some issues associated with using it, like hallucinations and deepfakes and so forth. And then we'll talk a little bit about knowledge and what constitutes true knowledge, authentic knowledge. And then we have Dr. Hamou as well here to talk about using it for productivity boosts, which I also need to learn about. And then in general, I want to hear from people here as well, how you've been using it, what questions you have, where it served you well, where it's not served you well. And I want to leave a lot of time for questions and discussion as well. So I'll try to get through the material fairly quickly. I don't have a ton of slides. So we had a part one of this talk last year, and we covered things like what can it do, how does it actually work under the hood. We went over some challenges for us, for human beings in general, and then for us as Muslims specifically, as the technology grew more advanced. We looked at impacts on working professionals, on parents, on youth, on students, and then we covered opportunities with Gen AI as well. I'm not going to repeat the whole talk, obviously, but we'll retread some of those things from a different angle. So today, again, recap takeaways from last year. I'll talk about how to use it as professionals, as Muslims, how to not use it. Yeah, okay. So, very briefly, what is AI? What is generative AI? Typically, any system that is capable of performing cognitive tasks that we normally associate with human beings, cognitive tasks like perception, like things like hearing and seeing, things like reasoning, like planning, understanding, comprehension, problem solving, things like that. And then, more specifically, learning. So, and by learning, what I mean is improving in how you do a certain task based on feedback. So when a system does these cognitive tasks, we say that it's an AI system, okay? Now, I'm not really going to go over how it works and so forth at a high level. That comes a little bit later. But I want to jump right into the drastic improvements over the past few years. So last year, we covered some areas where Gen AI really shines. So we talked about things like text generation, like generating poetry. We talked about its applications in text to image. We talked about proteins. Talked about a few different things, right? Generating itineraries, generating recipes, and so forth. What I want to zoom in on today, just to demonstrate the rapidity of its advance, is text to image. So these images are taken from a professor at Wharton named Ethan Mollick. And he writes a newsletter, and if you're interested in AI at all, generative AI, I recommend you subscribe to it. One of his recent posts was titled, "The Recent History of AI in 32 Otters." And so he just has, every time there's a new model coming out, he tries a prompt on it, specifically about generating a picture of an otter on a plane using Wi-Fi. Don't ask me why, but that's become his benchmark, right? He said something about his daughter's favorite animal being an otter or something. I don't know where the Wi-Fi on a plane comes from. But anyway, text to image has been around for a few years, even before ChatGPT, before December 2022. Before that, they used these things called generative adversarial networks, and then you had diffusion models, and now you had multimodal image generation models. So the technology has been advancing very quickly. So the first image you see on the very left, that's pre-Gen AI, pre-ChatGPT. It's from 2021, right? So it's a picture of an otter using Wi-Fi on a plane. It's kind of blurry, not very clear, right? Not great. And then this picture, the one to its right, is from November 2022. You can see it's getting better. Still not great. And then 6 months later, you can see a lot more detail, right? And then a little bit over a year later, July 2024, you can see an incredible amount of detail, right? It's got shadows, it's got lighting. And then a year after that, earlier this year, 6 months ago, this is the picture that the latest model at the time generated. Look at the incredible amount of detail, the hair, the nose, the tiny laptop. And then this picture is just from a month or two ago, I believe, the final one, right? I have, okay, yeah, so this slide, it shows the first and last one, so 2021 to 2025. Look at how quickly, or how much it's advanced in just a span of 4 years. The level of detail, and like I said, it's not even using diffusion models anymore, it's using a different kind of model to generate this. And then there's also videos. You can also use this to generate videos, and I have, again, otter on a plane. It's kind of wild, right? The level of detail. The sound is also automatically generated, by the way. Okay. So this is where we are today in terms of text to image, text to video. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about how they work, but I do want to get into a little bit of detail, just maybe one layer deeper, just because I want us to understand some of the issues associated with it. Now, by this point, we've all used ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and we've heard the term hallucination, where it gets something wrong, makes something up. I'm going to talk about hallucinations later, and I want to explain why they happen so that you know why they happen, and you plan for it, and you work around it. So Gen AI and large language models are based on this architecture called neural networks. And what you do is you take some data that represents something, maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's a brain scan of somebody, maybe it's data points associated with the debit card transaction, and you take that thing and you turn it into a bunch of numbers, okay? It's called vectorizing it. You turn it into a numerical representation and you pass it through this network, right? A very large network called a neural network. And what happens inside this network is it's a lot of multiplications and additions, right? Multiplications, additions, some basic function applications. And then once you apply those multiplications and additions and functions, you pass it to the next layer, and then the next layer, and then the next layer, and so forth. Until at the end, you get another numerical representation that's the output of what you're trying to predict, right? So if it's a picture, you might be trying to predict a category for the picture. If it's a debit card transaction, you might be trying to predict, is it fraudulent or is it not fraudulent? If it's a sentence, you might be trying to predict what type of sentence is it, or what kind of word is this, or what should the next word be, right? So there's always something you're trying to predict. And so it starts with whatever you want to start with, it passes through a network, you get back another numerical vector, and then that vector represents your output, right? That's a representation of your output. If it's a brain scan, for example, it might be whether so-and-so's brain scan is anomalous or not anomalous, and so forth. And so you want to make sure that the weights, the numbers that you multiply with in your network reflect what it is you want it to do. So you want to make sure that those numbers reflect whether a debit card transaction is considered fraudulent or not. Like if you live in Seattle and you just had a debit card transaction at Fred Meyer or something, right? And then an hour later, the same debit card is used at a gas station in New Jersey, right? When you look at all those facts in totality, it's pretty clear that the transaction in New Jersey at a gas station was fraudulent, right? So you feed in all that information, and the weights in the network represent this knowledge that this is an unlikely event, this is likely fraudulent, and then you get your output. So what a large language model like ChatGPT is doing is that it's looking at very, very large amounts of text. And then it's using that large amount of text to learn patterns of what words follow other words, okay? So it's looking at the beginning of a sentence and trying to predict what word comes next. And it's doing that based on its knowledge of billions and trillions of sentences it's seen in the past, right? That's really all it's doing, okay? It's looked at a tremendous amount of paragraphs and sentences, and then based on that, it's trying to predict what the next word should be. It's a giant autocomplete machine, okay? That's the main takeaway I want you to have from this slide. The main idea behind these neural networks is a very specific kind of architecture in the neural networks. If you're interested, you can look it up. It's a paper which at this point is almost 10 years old, came out in 2017. It's called Attention is All You Need, and it proposed this very specific architecture called the transformer architecture. And it's a really efficient way of dynamically weighting different parts of a sentence based on how much they matter to the meaning of the sentence. And so all your favorite chatbot models that you know, ChatGPT, Claude, Llama, they're all based on the transformer architecture. Okay, so an LLM, a large language model today, is a very, very large transformer-based deep neural network that can predict a word based on surrounding words, okay? And by doing this over and over again, word by word, you get it to generate a long stream of text. So they start with your prompt, and then based on your prompt, it predicts the next word, and then based on your prompt and the first word, it predicts the second word, and then based on all of that, predicts the third word, and so on and so forth, right? It's called next token prediction. So you can get it to generate whatever you want, right? A paragraph, an essay, an answer to a question, a piece of code, an email, whatever you want. So these machines, these neural networks, they're trained for one task and one task only, right? Given a set of words, make a prediction about what word should come next. That's all that they're trained to do. And if you're paying attention, you'll realize that I said nothing about correctness. I just said that they predict the next word given a set of words in the past. Okay? So let's keep going. Now, okay. So you've heard the word hallucinations before. And the reason I went into the whole tangent about how they work is so that we understand why they hallucinate. Okay, so let's go for some examples first, and then we can talk about why. So chatbots make stuff up all the time, right? It used to be much worse than it is today. They've improved a lot. They don't make as much stuff up now. That's false. But they used to make stuff up a lot, all the time, a couple years ago at least. And so here's a couple headlines. One is that Air Canada, almost 2 years ago at this point, kind of jumped the gun on how much they wanted to automate their customer service using chatbots. So they fired a whole bunch of people, and then they let chatbots take over the customer service. And the chatbots quickly learned that the fastest way to end a conversation was to just give everybody a refund, okay? And so that's what they started doing. And then the airline tried to argue in court that they shouldn't be held liable for anything that the chatbot gave away. Somebody asked ChatGPT about a certain person in the UK, and he was the mayor of a city or town or something, and ChatGPT made stuff up. Oh, this mayor is mired in scandal, and he had these accusations against him, and so on and so forth. And so this mayor started a lawsuit against OpenAI because of what the chatbot made up. So The thing is that chatbots or these large language models are not originally trained to come up with factual text. They're just trained to come up with the next word given what they've seen in the past. And so you can understand why these hallucinations happen, right? These so-called hallucinations. Just because a word fits somewhere doesn't mean that it's correct. If you ask me for directions to how to get to a Space Needle from here, I could tell you to step outside the masjid, and then I would start with turn, and now there's probably two words that are going to come out of my mouth next, left or right. And so the LLM assigns probabilities to left or right. And because the LLM doesn't really know what a map is or where Map Seattle is in relation to the Space Needle, it's gotten a roughly equal chance of of spitting out the word left or right. Right? As far as the language model is concerned, they're both equally likely. They're both equally meaningful. Sometimes when you get it to write papers for you, it even makes up references. There's been cases where lawyers have submitted briefs to courts with fake citations, with made-up references. Because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to generate text that seems right, that fits. One time, Google's model suggested that you put glue on pizza to make it more delicious. This was fairly recent, maybe a few months ago. Here's an example from ChatGPT. This is from a couple years ago. It probably doesn't do it anymore. It can be incredibly wrong at times. One of my friends asked it, when is it allowed to eat pork in Islam? And so ChatGPT says, oh, it's permissible under certain conditions. You got to slaughter it properly, you got to let the blood drain, and so on and so forth. Right? This is not correct. This is an example of a hallucination. Okay? And now because you're all experts in how LLMs work, you know why this is happening. Okay? Here's another example. Somebody asked it, how many R's in the word strawberry? And ChatGPT came back and said, there's 2 R's. And so they said, count again. And then ChatGPT comes back and says, there's 3 R's in the word strawberry. And then kudos to this person, because it kept going. They said, count again. ChatGPT comes back and said, there's 4 R's. Okay? If you know a little bit about how LLMs work, in terms of words and tokens and so forth, you'll get why this happens. Because LLMs don't work at the character level, they work at the token level. Tokens are like sub words, parts of words. And so sometimes they're incredibly smart, but sometimes they're also incredibly dumb. Okay? Now, it's not necessary that we're stuck with this, right? There's ways of improving them. There's techniques called retrieval augmented generation, there's checkers, there's a whole bunch of things we can tack on to LLMs to improve and to reduce hallucinations. And they've gotten much better in the past year, okay? To the point where hallucinations are much rarer than they were before. The thing is, you still need to check. So I remember checking for visa requirements a few months ago, or last year actually at this point. And for a tax thing as well, around April. And I had some really intricate details, right? If I have so-and-so passport, and I have so-and-so visas, and what do I need to get into so-and-so country, for example? Right? It's very intricate questions. And ChatGPT got it wrong, okay? At least it gave me websites where I could go back to check, to figure out what the right answer was, and to figure out that it was wrong. And then I had a really intricate tax question as well, which it also got wrong. And so I knew enough to check the actual websites and to know that ChatGPT or Gemini was wrong. So why does this happen? At the core of it, LLMs learn style and vocabulary. They learn how we talk, they learn the words that we use, they learn how we use them, but they don't learn factuality, right? Style doesn't substitute for content. But having the right style makes you sound authoritative, okay? If somebody wears the right attire and speaks with some authority, they have some charisma, and they have good grammar, and they have the right vocabulary for the subject they're talking about, generally speaking, when you combine all these signs, we assume they know what they're talking about. It's an assumption that we make in our heads. And the problem with LLMs is that they start out with this. Us as human beings, we spend years acquiring that vocabulary, acquiring that grammar, acquiring that authority, acquiring those clothes. But LLMs, they get that for free. And so LLMs make us question this, right? Style, we think style is hard to get, but LLMs get style for free. We believe somebody wearing a lab coat, right? If they're giving you medical advice, or they're talking about something medical, and they have a serious face, and they use the right terms, you believe them, because they have that air of authority over them, right? Because they look the part and they use the right words. In fact, in the US, it's actually a law that says that you cannot wear a lab coat and advertise certain things on TV, because people might be misled to believe that you're a doctor and that this is medical advice. It can give people a false sense of credibility. But the thing is, LLMs have this for free. They can sound really authoritative while spouting nonsense. And so we look at that style and we associate it with factuality and credibility. Same thing with a lab coat. It's just a piece of cloth, but we associate it with authority and knowledge. So similarly, when somebody uses words well, has a good vocabulary, and can string those words together in a way that sounds intelligent, we associate expertise with them. And that's why we associate expertise with LLMs. So they sound authoritative, but they can be very wrong. So it's about style versus content. And for those of us a little bit more technical here who want to understand why hallucinations happen, or at least begin looking into it, there's a paper published literally a couple months ago, September of this year. Highly recommend if you're interested in the topic. The few takeaways from this paper is that it can't be solved. With the current architecture, this is an inevitable outcome of the way that we train LLMs today. It's an inevitable outcome of the architecture and the training process, the training procedure, and what incentives we give LLMs during the training and post-training phase. So even if you have perfect training data, it's not going to solve the problem. It's an intrinsic consequence. It happens because LLMs are really good at using patterns like grammar and spelling, but they struggle with random facts, like somebody's birthday or something, okay? Because they don't follow clear rules. Like with grammar, with spelling, there's a set of rules you follow, right? You see them a lot of times in your training data, but when you ask it, what's so-and-so's birthday, or things that it's only seen once in its training set, it really falters, okay? And then another reason that they hallucinate is because during the training process, they're incentivized to guess, even if they're wrong. So we don't teach LLMs that they can say, I don't know. We teach them that, you know what, even if you're not sure, just say something. That's the incentive that's given to them as part of the training and post-training procedures. And so that really handicaps its ability to be factual. When you add retrieval to the game, by retrieval what I mean is, we don't just ask the LLM for something, we give it a certain set of facts that we wanted to pull from. It really improves things. It really reduces hallucinations. Okay, let's keep going. Another major issue with LLMs is it enables a lot of non-technical people. It democratizes the ability to produce fake information, fake text, fake images, fake videos, right? And you've heard of these things, right? You've seen images that AI has generated that are known to be fake news. There's scams happening today where AI impersonates somebody's voice. So there was a really horrible case of an older woman being conned out of thousands of dollars because she got a phone call from somebody that sounded exactly like her daughter, who was in a panic because she was driving and supposedly she hit somebody and she needed money to get bail because she was about to be taken to prison. And so this woman got a phone call from somebody that sounded exactly like her daughter. And so she gave away that money. AI makes it very easy for these kinds of scams to happen. There was another one, this is just from last week. People generate fake videos to propagate Islamophobia. So this particular video, it's fake, it's AI generated, is of a man in quote unquote Muslim garb approaching a woman with bad intentions. And then if you see there's a cat in the corner, and apparently that cat foils this attempt. And so this post was tweeted and retweeted and seen by millions of people about how Muslims do this in Western countries and so forth. And the whole thing is AI generated, okay? There have been fake robocalls using President Biden's voice to discourage people from voting in primaries. There's been phone calls impersonating the Secretary of State, calling people in government, calling ambassadors, calling foreign governments using Marco Rubio's voice. There's scammers claiming to be from your bank. So all of this stuff has gotten really easy to do. And the reason I keep mentioning all of these is just to make sure that we're on alert. Because it could be me or you tomorrow that gets scammed, unless we're really, really alert. One of the other reasons that I bring up deepfakes is to talk about verification and authenticity and so forth. And the reason I want to talk about it is because this comes from our tradition. One of my hadith teachers last week was talking about about the rigor of verification in our tradition. If you know a little bit about hadith, and if you know about how they're authenticated, you know that we need to have a fully connected chain. We need to know that person X heard it from so-and-so person, and that person heard it from somebody else, and they heard it from somebody else. And we need to know that they've met. We need to know that each person is known for their excellent precision, their memory, or their writing. We need to know that each person is an upright Muslim. We have all these conditions, right? Our scholars established these conditions so that we could know beyond a shadow of a doubt what the Prophet ﷺ actually said and what he did. This is a science that we Muslims established. But it's not just that. It goes beyond that. And this is what my teacher was talking about last week. So there was a scholar in the past, a tabi'i, his name was Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, one of the giants of hadith. And he had a lot of students. A lot of the other giants of hadith were his students. Imam Malik was his student. And his other students, many of them also giants, Uqayl and Shu'aib and Yunus and Ma'mar. And so the scholars after them, when it came to authenticating hadith, it wasn't just about who did you hear it from and who did you hear it from and who did you hear it from, and then are all these people reliable or not. It wasn't just about that. They specifically look at what did Imam Malik narrate from Zuhri, and they look at that text, and then they go, well, you know what, Zuhri had so many other students. Let's see what the other students narrated. So they look at one narration, and then they look at the versions of that narration that reached them from his other students, from Yunus, from Uqayl, from Ma'mar, and they look at the variations in those. And then they see who was more precise in passing it on, in narrating it. So it's not that they look at one chain, they look at the context. And if it so happens that Imam Malik is in a chain of a hadith, and he's the only one that's narrating it from Zuhri, our scholars ask, why is he the only one? We know that Zuhri had so many other students. There's something wrong here. So we had some really sophisticated systems of verification and figuring out if something was actually the way it's said to be. So we have this in our tradition, and we have the gold standard, and we just need to rediscover it, adapt it to our times. Our scholars applied it to their times, when the need of the hour was to figure out what hadith was reliable and which one wasn't. And it's up to us to figure out how to apply it in our times. And the connection that I'm making here is, what steps do we take when we hear information? When we see something on social media, what steps do we take? How do we verify it? What's our instinct? Do we actually want to verify it? Do we get outraged immediately? And another reason that this specific example came to mind is because of something really random that happened, right? So last week, we had the election in New York, and then, Mamdani won the election, and then a couple days later, somebody found a headline. One of my friends found a headline that said that, oh, the new mayor is gonna arrest ICE agents, for example, okay? The headline was something like that. And then they wanted to send it to all of their friends, because this is huge, okay? And I credit them for this. He was like, you know what? let me check if somebody else is reporting this, because this sounds too big to be true. And so he searched and he found one news article about this, and nobody else had this. And so he was like, you know what? This might not be correct. And so he held off on it. And this reminded me of what our scholars did in the past. All right? So the point of all of this is that we have to develop a culture of verification, right? We can't just see things, get outraged immediately, send it to all of our friends, and then move on, right? What mechanisms and tools do we have to authenticate and verify information? What culture are we promoting among our families and our friend groups when it comes to information? Are we politely but firmly teaching people how to fact check, how to use these tools? What if somebody shares something with you and says, this is from the Quran, or this is from the Prophet ﷺ, or it's a video of a scholar saying something that they actually didn't say? Do we pass it on, or do we verify it first? And how do we verify it? What are those tools? When we get an image in our WhatsApp groups, what does it mean to apply the Quranic command to fatabayyanu, to investigate? And so we need literacy on this as a community. And so it's upon all of us to educate ourselves and educate our friends or families who are less technically literate as us. The Prophet ﷺ said, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ كَذِبًا أَنْ يُحَدِّثَ بِكُلِّ مَا سَمِعَ. It is enough of a lie for a man to narrate everything that he hears, meaning that we have to verify what we hear before we pass it on. Okay, I think this is my last heavy slide, and then it'll be easy going. So, and then these things to be wary of. These are not just for Muslims; it's for everybody, but especially for us. So, these LLMs, when you interact with them, many of them have something called the sycophancy bias, which means that they tend to reinforce your prior beliefs. So if you notice, whenever you ask it a question, it starts with, "Great question!" Okay? Or if you ask it to validate an idea, it says, "That's a really good idea. Let me work on it." So it has a tendency to be a sycophant. And it tends to reinforce your prior beliefs. So it's something we have to be on guard about. Okay? And then LLMs are changing the way that we engage with texts, the way that we comprehend. And so I took the screenshot from a PDF reader app. It's a long document, and then at the top it says, "This appears to be a long document. Save time by reading a summary." And so almost everywhere you go now, you see these things, right? It's a really long article. You want to read a summary? Here's a book. Do you want the key points of the book? You see this everywhere now. And the issue with this is that if you constantly keep getting spoon-fed these summaries and key points, you will never learn how to extract those key points for yourself. You will never learn those skills of struggling with the text to understand its meaning, and then to understand what it means for you. To extract those lessons for yourself, right? To turn your brain into knots, trying to understand and summarize for yourself. And the thing is that LLMs, you can think of them as the average of the internet, right? You have a unique set of experiences, a unique set of languages, a unique set of life experiences. And so what you take away from a text is different from what I would take away from a text. And it's certainly very different from what the average of the internet would take away from a text. And so if you're constantly using LLMs to summarize documents for you, you're really missing out on a lot. And your brain muscles are atrophying, right? Your comprehension muscles. So the LLM's lessons are not the same as your lessons, are not the same as somebody else's lessons. It's not shaped by the life experiences. And sure, once in a while it'll save some time, but if you keep doing it for really important things, you just don't have that ability, and then at that point, you're functionally illiterate, okay? Now, a lot of what follows is taken from a psychologist named Simon Sinek. I've adapted it, of course, but the key ideas are his. So, for a lot of our abilities today, right, whether it's writing, whether it's reciting Quran, whether it's cooking, whatever it is, right? We are where we are in our abilities because we put in the blood, sweat, and tears to develop those skills, right? We're a better writer today because we wrote those hundreds of essays that got brutally marked in red ink, and we went back and corrected them. We're a better cook today because, dozens of times we put in way too much salt or something, right? We're a better reciter of Quran today because our teachers corrected us for every makhraj that we got wrong. We practice the same ayah dozens of times, hundreds of times. And it's not just about having the results, right? We made mistakes, we learned along the way, and then we achieved something. We achieved the ability to write. We achieved the ability to recite Quran. We achieved the ability to not cut our fingers when we make food, okay? If we were just handed a perfectly written essay every time, if we were just able to put on a reciter on YouTube whenever we wanted, if we were just given a perfectly cooked meal every single time, then we're not becoming a better version of ourselves. Each time we do that, we're not developing those skills. And if this doesn't faze you, think about this. AI can be your friend. It can even be your therapist. Even in therapy, there's different madhabs of how you approach therapy. You can tell ChatGPT, this is my situation, and I want you to analyze it from this madhab of therapy. Okay? I want you to analyze my situation, my feelings, and tell me how to view it differently and how to modify my behavior. You can do that, and ChatGPT will do a really good job. It'll actually do a really good job of doing that for you. But the problem is when you do this, you're not developing those skills. When a friend comes to you with their own situation, you no longer have those muscles of being empathetic to them and understanding them and comforting them and being there for them in times of stress. You're not developing those human interaction skills. If you mess up with your spouse and you go to ChatGPT for advice, what do I do? What do I say? ChatGPT will give you a really good answer. It'll be an above average answer. But if you keep doing that, you're not developing those skills. If you're a manager at work and your employee messed up and you got to have a tough conversation with them, and you go to ChatGPT and you ask for a script, it'll give you a good script. But then you're not developing those skills. It's hard work. And so if we don't go through failure and struggle, it leaves us worse off, right? We never make those pathways in our brains. We never release those chemicals. The feeling after a tough hike, when you get to the top of the mountain, right? It releases endorphins in our brains. If we were able to magically transport to the top, it's not the same. Our bodies don't feel the same. It's not as sweet. And what happens when we rely on these tools too much is that when it comes time to resolve conflict, when it comes time to face stressful situations, how do we do it? How do we navigate those situations without losing our tempers, without feeling overwhelmed? How do we give and receive feedback? How do we express empathy? When we have to do these things without ChatGPT's help, we become helpless. And so some of these things, they can be problematic, and we need to be careful about how we use AI. Now, having said all of that, having pointed out its stunning and rapid advances, all the pitfalls and drawbacks, the hallucinations, the deepfakes, the point of all this is not to discourage you from using it. Quite the opposite, right? We must use it, or else we get left behind. We must use it productively and responsibly and positively. And so what are some ways we can use it to be productive? I hear some whispers. Okay. Okay.
Everything I'm going to say is
No,
not at all.
Not at all. I will leave.
No.
So how do we use it to be productive? Me personally, I find it really useful when it comes to ideation, when it comes to initial research on something, right? I just say, give me 5 ideas on so-and-so topic. If I'm stuck on something, if I can't go any further, give me 5 ideas on how to do something. It's a great way to move past a block that you're facing. You might not like any of them, but it'll unlock some thinking, it'll unlock some creative juices in you, and it gets you moving again. It's really good at generating pictures. If your job or your work involves generating pictures for illustration or flyers or anything else, it's really good at doing that. But again, check everything. Be very careful. Somebody I know made a flyer for an event, and it had the right date, right? October something something. It had the wrong day because they used Gen AI to generate the entire flyer, and they didn't check. Flyer went out, they had to send out corrections. It was the whole thing. So make sure you check everything. And this advice applies to everything, right? Every piece of text you generate, every image, every video, make sure you check everything, right? You treat it like an untrustworthy teammate. So it's one of the main takeaways today, right? We got to be proficient at using it to increase our productivity, and we need to know how to check its output. It's really good at summarizing tasks. Maybe you have feedback from a bunch of users. You want to summarize it. It's great at doing that. Maybe you want to outline a grant proposal. And we'll talk about how to do some of these things, right? How to get it to do them in a way that doesn't have hallucinations, how to do it in a way that's not the average of the internet, how to do it in a way that reflects what you want out of it. We'll talk about that. It's especially... it's really good at languages. It's really good at translating between languages. It's really good at generating automatic transcripts of audio and video. It's good at understanding images. It's great for processing a lot of information at once. And again, it's really good for initial research, help you find or fix a direction. But when you need to do work that's going to be important, it's going to be reviewed by other people, you're going to want a heavier hand on things. You're going to want to check everything. You're going to want to go in a more piecewise fashion. You want to check the output at every stage. You want to maybe nudge it in this direction or that direction a little bit. Okay, so here's a couple examples, right? The way you get it to do what you want it to do is to give it a lot of context. So instead of saying, for example, I got to do a khutbah next week, give me a khutbah on patience, right? That's a really bad way of using an LLM. What you want to say is, okay, so you tell it a little bit about yourself. I'm an Imam, or I'm an occasional khatib or something, okay? And then you give it more context. My community is so-and-so. And this happened in our community last week. And what I want from this khutbah is to inspire people to have patience on so-and-so matter. And I want to have a reminder in there. And I need inspirational stories. And the time of year in so-and-so. And Ramadan's coming up. Okay? And I want an academic style of a khutbah, or I want a conversational style of a khutbah. So the prompt you give it, the more context you have in it, the better output you're going to get. Right? Rather than just saying, give me a khutbah on patience. Okay? And then another way to improve its output is to give it samples. Like, this is my style. This is something I've written in the past. This is a speech I gave in the past. This is my style. And it'll do a really good job of mimicking your style. Okay? Okay, so the question is now, can you take your religion from an LLM? Do we have any thoughts on this? Yes? No? Yes? Why not? Okay. Okay, so the answer is just based on how it works, because of hallucinations, because it's just predicting the next word, we don't take chances on learning our religion from LLMs. Anybody want to contradict that? There is room for contradiction, by the way. There's no right answer to this. Like, there's a right answer, but there's competing viewpoints. Anybody want to compete against it? Yes, Talal. Okay, Bismillah, go for it. Okay. 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 Anybody else? Yes. Yes, sorry. So yes, the point is that it's good to supplement something. If you already have an initial idea, if you want some direction, it's good at basic research. Is that a fair summary, Talal? Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Yes.
I was going to say no, it's not good
Okay.
to take your religion from it for two primary reasons, beyond just hallucinations. LLMs, the way that they're used right now, they have a lot of confirmation bias
Okay.
in terms of how they end up being used. So it goes back and looks in your own chat history
Yep.
and figures out like, hey, you as X like this thing, you prefer this point of view.
Yep.
And it ends up confirming that to you. Two, it sort of ends up taking the science of usul fiqh out of the picture.
Yep.
Which means that you're not following one of the madhabs,
Okay.
you're not following imams, you're not following
Yeah.
scholarly tradition. It's just giving you something and you don't know.
Okay. So the answer is that, the answer from the brother is that there's confirmation bias and you don't really know what it's doing because when you ask somebody a question about the religion, you kind of trust them to have some sort of set of principles by which they derive answers, and you really don't know that for an LLM. So when you ask somebody of knowledge a question about the religion, especially a question that about a situation you're facing, right, about halal and haram and something, their job is to take into account the time and place of the questioner, right? Their specific situation, their specific circumstances. And their goal in giving you that answer is to give you an answer that brings you closer to Allah, brings you closer to Allah's law, brings you closer to what Allah wants of you in that situation, okay? So you've seen at a very basic level how LLMs work, right? They're not optimizing for correctness, much less optimizing for what Allah wants of you, right? They find words that fit a surrounding set of words. Here's an example, again, from a few years ago. So it's not going to be as bad this year. Somebody asked an LLM, is it preferred to wash my knees as part of wudu? And so the LLM sounds really authoritative. It says, it's not obligatory, but yeah, it is recommended. It's not, okay, but it sounds really authoritative. Now, are there efforts to fix some of these shortcomings? Yes, okay? And I will leave you at the end of this slide with a tool, right? There's some really smart people working on tools to resolve some of these issues, right? And one such tool is called Ansari.chat. Nothing to do with me, although I am privileged to know the person that developed this, Dr. Walid Qaddous over in Sacramento. And he and I have run workshops before. And so this is a tool that uses the technique I mentioned earlier called retrieval. And so it provides a very stringent set of texts and guardrails to an LLM, which it uses to answer a question. And so if you don't have access to a sheikh or to a mufti or to an imam, and you need to know about what Islam says about something, this is a good place to start. It's not a good place to finish, because it can still make mistakes, it can still hallucinate, but this is a good place to start, okay? It's like a chatbot, you can ask it questions, it'll give you references. It's a good place to do initial research. And again, I'm saying if you don't have access to a personal knowledge at the moment, this is a good stopgap solution, okay? It still doesn't reason like a mufti, like the brother said, there's no usul al-fiqh behind it, but it's able to look up previous fatwas and religious texts. Okay, maybe we'll skip some of this. Okay, yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to add,
Yeah.
add something that I don't want the reporter says. What if, when given the prompt, for example, you ask like let's say ChatGPT to give like sources, some reliable sources, because they sometimes provide like links, right?
Yep.
Like you can go verify for yourself, or maybe
Yep.
just look up the results.
Yep.
As I said, verify and make
Yep.
sure it's accurate.
Yeah, so if you have the literacy to go through those links, if you know that those links are reliable, then yeah, absolutely do that. That's part of the literacy we need. And they're much better now at citing their sources than they were a year or 2 years ago. So absolutely use functionality when you ask ChatGPT, when you ask Claude, when you ask Gemini, absolutely ask it to give citations, and then go investigate those citations for the important parts of the answer. So now I want to hear from Imam Akram to set the stage for how we talk about using Gen AI in a permissible way.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. First of all, I'll keep it short because I really want to hear from you guys, and I'm very intrigued by what Brother Hidayath or Dr. Hidayath and Dr. Ali have to say. And also, Dr. Hidayath actually covered a lot of my points. So that whole discussion about should we use it for religious purposes, alhamdulillah, we already covered that, so we don't have to go deeper into that. I do just want to mention something, though, that we just did, right, while Dr. Hidayath was talking. Ali pulled this up and he said, is it obligatory to wash your knees for wudu right now? So just so you guys are not like thinking like, oh, you know, that was maybe 2-3 years ago, but ChatGPT is legit now. And literally it says, yes, washing the knees is obligatory for wudu, right? So all of you guys, because they are part of the legs, right? Talk about usul al-fiqh, that's usul al-fiqh right there. So all of you guys have had invalid wudu, so you got to remake 20, 30 years of prayers, okay? And then we said, yeah, you scolded it. He said, you idiot, give us a better answer. Then it said, this content violates our policy. Okay, so, alhamdulillah, right? So that kind of, you know, covers it. I mean, honestly, that's the only example I need to give to talk about this issue, right? But number one thing when it comes to fiqh, the fiqh is really simple, right? It's not that complicated. AI is a tool, right? Let's just acknowledge that it's a tool, just like any other tool. You can use a tool for halal, you can use a tool for haram. As long as you're not using the tool for haram, you're good. That is the fiqh of it, right? That's the permissibility of it. So if I give someone a knife and they use the knife to cut onions and to, you know, cut steak and cut meat and, you know, whatever, all that kind of stuff, they're using the knife in a permissible way. But if I give someone a knife and they're using it to, you know, do other things, they're not using it in a permissible way, right? So there's halal ways to use a tool, haram ways to use a tool, okay? Now, there was a question that was brought up about, you know, okay, but sometimes it links to reference, and therefore we're able to kind of cross-reference things like that. Even when it comes to our deen, if someone is not a religious scholar, and because of the isnad system that Hidayath talked about, AI will never be part of the isnad, right? We still should not try to look at the sources and be like, oh, he got it from a credible source, therefore this answer must be credible. Because someone can quote something credibly, but not have the correct interpretation. This actually happened in the lifetime of Ali radiallahu anh. Ali radiallahu anh was judging about a matter, and one of the Khawarij came to him, and he quoted the Quran. Can anybody say the Quran is not an authority? Of course it's an authority. He goes to Ali radiallahu anh and he says, La hukma illa lillah. There is no judge, there is no rule except for the judgment and the rule of Allah. He says this to Ali radiallahu anh. Ali radiallahu anh, he says, Kalamatu haq urida biha al-batil. You just said a word of truth, but you intended with it falsehood. So he quoted the correct source, but the interpretation of it was batil, it was false. So even if AI does quote the correct source, if we don't understand that source ourselves, we still can't take it as an authority. And this is going to be universal. No matter how good AI ever gets, you can never remove the isnad system from our religion. So, you know, I'm not just saying this because of job security purposes, right? This is the reality. Our deen is passed from heart to heart, from person to person. Is it a fair statement to say that we live in an era where the deen is more accessible than ever before? Yeah? All of you are dumber than Imam Ghazali. That's it. Nobody here, nobody in our lifetime right now is close to as intelligent as Imam Ghazali. Do we have more knowledge accessible to us than Imam Ghazali? Absolutely we do. Whether we understand the depth of it or not is a completely different story, right? So, now, the other, for example, I'll give a quick example. Like when we were studying Sahih Muslim in madrasa, we were not allowed to use Turath or like or Shamila or any of these websites where they have all the hadith laid out perfectly for you with the bab, with the hadith number, with the topic, and it looks nice font that it's really readable. No, we read manuscripts, right? where you can't even tell where the first hadith starts and the other hadith ends, and where's the bab, is that a ya or a ba or a ta, because there's no dots, it's just a line. You just got to figure out what the context of the word before it, or what it could mean. That's what we read from. It was not allowed for us to ever open up any of those sources. Now, after we graduated, the teacher said, go ahead and use all that stuff now. Because now you have the ability to access the source. My dad has been a software engineer since the 70s, or like 80s, 70s. He's OG. He's the reason why, my dad's actually the reason why anybody can even type in Arabic now on computers. So he knows the source. He says, I'm seeing these graduates that know all these coding languages, they don't even know how these coding languages were made, right? He's like, all these people are dumb. Like they look very dumb compared to the original software engineers that built these processes in the first place, because they understand the source of it more than anybody else understands the source. So that's very important. That's extremely important. Now, a question that we get, and I'll just share this because people are always curious. Do imams use AI, right? And so, yes, I use AI. I'll tell you how I use AI. Okay, I will tell you exactly how I use AI. I never use AI, and I say myself because I don't want to speak for anybody else, right? Some people may use it for certain things and other things, but I'll just tell you how I use it. I never use AI for anything meaningful. Meaning, if I don't know how to do it myself, I'm not going to have AI do it. AI is my assistant, not my teacher. So I'll give you a great example, right? Khutbahs. I have to prepare a khutbah almost every week. So before AI, I have to sit there and type everything out. Now with AI voice to text, what I literally do is I just spit my khutbah to my phone that I'm going to give that week, the whole thing. And I'll recite the ayat, I'll recite the ahadith, I'll recite everything. I look crazy when I do it, but that's, I'm just speaking into my phone, voice to text. It converts everything to text. And then basically I just ask it to format it in a khutbah style. So I was already going to do that. That's the thing, I was already going to do that. Now I just saved myself an hour doing that, right? So I was already prepared to do that. So now I'm just having an assistant helping me make the process faster. That's how I use AI, right? I'll do that for like presentations or whatever, right? I was already gonna do it, but this is just a way to speed up the process. So, Dr. Hidayath brought up something like, it's an idea generator or starter. I actually won't use it for that. I won't use it to come up for my ideas, right? I have to come up with the idea myself. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I'm just telling you personally, that's how I use it, right? And that's the point of kind of a panel, because people are going to be using these things differently and having, different approaches to these type of things as well. And I'll conclude with one example of why even just quoting the right source is not enough. When I was in Hajj this year, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invite us to his home every year, Allahumma ameen. When I was in Hajj this year, there was a person in my group who asked me a fiqh question. I answered the fiqh question, he comes back to me 5 minutes later, and he says, ChatGPT gave me another answer. I was like, all right, what was the answer? And he thought he was smart. He started quoting. He's like, well, it said that you follow the Hanafi madhab, and it said that in Al-Hidayath, which is like an advanced Hanafi text, this is the ibara, the Arabic text that it gave me, and all that kind of, and it contradicts what you said. And there was like one word in there that was like, when I was reading it, I was like, something's off. And the reason why I knew something was off was just because of recency, because on the flight to Hajj, I read Kitab al-Hajj from Hidayath before arriving. So I knew, for the most part, when I was reading that Arabic line that ChatGPT spat out for this person from the book Hidayath, I just happened to read it before I got off the flight, that was not actually a line in the book. And so I was like, I promise you, I'm 95% sure that line doesn't even exist in the book. And so I went back and I started looking, and that's when I just used Turath and I tried to look it up, right? Really quickly. Again, just speed up the process. It wasn't there. So I got confused. I was like, how did this AI just make up a line? So then I asked it, where did you get it from? And it linked to source. I clicked on the source. What it was an Orientalist translation of Hidayath from like Stanford University Library. It took the line that was translated by an Orientalist, which they are very notorious and famous for mistranslating technical terms in Islamic fiqh and usul al-fiqh and other sciences, And it took that translation, retranslated it back to Arabic, and that was the line. You understand? Right? That was the line. It said it's directly from Hidayath. Imam Marghanani said this. No, he didn't. That's a completely different line that you just quoted. So, I'll conclude there, inshallah. Right? And I will pass it off now to our Dr. Ali. Barakallahu fikum.
One sec. I have one slide before.
Oh, one slide. Okay.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Akram. Hard-hitting examples. Okay, so what does this mean for us? What does it mean for a lot of us here who have jobs, working professionals? How are lives going to change, or how have they changed already? More specifically, how are creative or technology jobs going to change? You've seen what Gen AI is capable of. It's changing jobs already, right? Marketing, software development, healthcare, highly creative, highly educated jobs are changing. And what this means is that the bar for what we produce will rise. If an AI can produce what you produce, your job is at risk. If your employer finds that your work product is as good or worse than what ChatGPT can generate, that task in your job function is redundant. The people that keep their jobs going forward are going to be the ones that add value beyond what ChatGPT can. Something that's really high quality, something that can be replicated. So that's how you bring value, right? You're technically knowledgeable enough in your field that you can spot mistakes. Like Imam Akram just spotted a very subtle mistake that maybe many other people could not have spotted, right? Subtle mistakes in code, subtle mistakes in the output of an LLM. As a doctor, maybe you bring value by surpassing the quality of AI output. It's a quote from Andrew Ng, who said this last year at a conference. AI won't replace human workers, but people that use AI will replace people that don't. And so this could prove to be very prescient advice for us for the future. Now, you could ask, is it like a typewriter? Typewriters didn't replace authors. We still have authors today. Just because we have power tools today doesn't mean that we have no more carpenters. Just because we have spreadsheets today doesn't mean that we don't need accountants anymore. But the nature of the job changed. The nature of being an author changed. The nature of the secretarial job changed with typewriters, right? Now we have executive assistants that do a lot more than just type stuff, right? And so that's not to say that we're competing with AI. The most successful people will be those that use AI to improve their own productivity. And so this is exactly where I want to ask Dr. Ali to jump in and to show us how to improve our productivity.
Can I have that? Will it reach? Yeah. Just plug. Can you guys see? Nope. Nope. Now you can see. Now you see what I see. Jazakallah khair. Everything that you've heard for the past hour, forget. I'll tell you, no, Jazakallah khair. I'm joking. Don't worry. He takes me too seriously. So, just to gauge the room, how many people work in tech? Just show of hands. No, that's a dumb question. How many people don't work in tech? Put your hand down, bro. Islam is technical. Okay. All right. So, I just created some slides. I did, not for these slides, but I did for other slides that I'm going to show you guys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about tech first, because that's my life outside of this building, and that's what I do. And the reality is that dev productivity has to go up, and that's what the people in the room. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the dev tooling that you guys use, but then I'll talk a little bit more general as well. So for the people that are not in tech, you can be bored for about 3 minutes, and then inshallah I'll give you guys some tools that you can use in your everyday life or outside of tech. So I'll say first and foremost, yes, I am working for Amazon. Yes, I do have a doc that you guys can all read for the next 6 minutes. And it is 6 pages on developing on AI, but I don't think anyone wants to look at that. So, dev productivity. Use what your company has provided for you. I have a nice link here. I work at Amazon, so I'm going to show you a link that I don't know if I can show, but I'm going to. In this, we have a very slow internet connection, but there are a number of tools that are provided by your company to increase your productivity. Why do they want to increase your productivity? Because if you don't increase your productivity, then not as much gets done, and then they replace you with a Gen AI bot. Clearly, that's what's going to happen. I don't know why this isn't loading. Okay, so internet's not working here, but that's okay. All right, khair, no problem. So use the tools that you can. Just one sec. Still authenticating. There we go. Yay, look. Hey, Ali, look at these. Discover these tools. There are 411 tools at Amazon that are categorized as software development tools. Like, if we're not talking about, like, fatigue of tooling, who is? So if you're at Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whatever tech company you work for, go to the site which they've recommended to you with your tooling and pick the top 5 and get familiar with them. Klein, QDeveloper, Amazon Quick Suite, AI Gemini. I use all 4 of these tools on the screen every day. To a lesser degree, the next 4, I use them as well. Kiro and Wasabi, I use every day. So these are things that you guys should be doing. And if you're not, your manager at your next review is not going to be as happy with you. Why? Because other people are using it. Other people are accomplishing things a lot faster. So you got to get good. Like, this is the reality. Some of the tools you can use for development, Cursor is probably the best thing to start with. It's easy, it's quick, it's slim. You guys can use it to build your personal projects or to build, help you move forward. Once you get good, use Claude Code. Unfortunately, at Amazon, it's not approved yet. We've been fighting like hell to try and get that approved. I don't know when it's going to happen, but Amazon released Kiro for non-Amazon people. It's got a really good spec-based approach to things. You can build requirements, tooling, designs, etc. And obviously VS Code. Now, we're going to get to the elephant in the room that Dr. Hidayath was talking about, is ChatGPT. ChatGPT is amazing. Why? Because context matters. Use it once, it sucks. Use it twice, it also sucks. But over a year, it knows who you are, right? It knows who you are. It knows what you're asking, and it knows what to expect, what you expect of it. So context is incredibly important to any LLM, to any of these models. Context is the most important thing. Even with these tools that I've showed on the screen, context matters. My team spends, I have 2 developers that are working on building MCP, building model context protocols. They build context so that our customers can understand our tooling, okay? So yeah, use it for everything, work-related. Because unfortunately, that's the bar. That's the bar today. And I'm gonna show you some examples of what I've generated using AI. This one's hilarious, actually. I basically asked ChatGPT, I said, hey, I'm giving a talk on AI and productivity. Generate some slides for me. It gave me the points. I took this, I threw it into Gamma, and it generated this really good slide deck on AI and productivity, which has a lot of good points, but it also has really dumb points, right? Like, AI isn't here to replace developers. It's here to remove the friction. That's a lie. That is a bold-faced lie. They are going to replace developers if they can. So you need to get good at using these tools. Actually, you need to be better than good. You need to be good at making these tools work for you, right? And I don't discount, I have a daughter in computer science, right? And I don't discount the fact that they have to understand fundamentals. You have to understand fundamentals. If you're a graduate of 2023 and 2024, how many are graduates of 2023 and 2024? Yeah, all the guys I know. Yeah, it does. It's a lot of clarity in this, being at this end of the table. So you guys have to understand fundamentals, meaning there's a lot of companies today that are actually quite dismayed at the caliber of university graduates because their GPAs are through the roof, or their GPTs are through the roof, rather. You know what I mean? Like their degrees are all supplemented with the use of these AI tools. And so they're actually starting to flag universities where they've got, university students that come out with high GPAs and they, interview really well on a screen, but when they bring them into the office, 6 months they get fired. Why? Because they're not comfortable supporting their own work. They get very nervous. They have no idea about how things are built. And really, they don't know how to hold themselves within a situation, like a context that they're unfamiliar in. Like they have no ability to be resilient. So, and I've got statistics at the wazoo. 6 months is 19 out of 20 of these graduates were fired. I can give you a load of those. But anyway, so like I generate, this was like, it's a really cool slide deck. It's way better than the one that I put together, especially because all the guys in it have beards and stuff, and that's amazing. But the reality is that you got to understand the fundamentals for that age group, or for those graduates. The people before that, they should have learned in university or college. Okay, so let's continue a little bit. I'll go really quickly. I just put these slides together as Dr. Hidayath was talking. Use an AI terminal. It's very helpful. For those of you at Amazon, use QChat, Q Developer Tools, or use Warp. If you like ChatGPT, use Codex CLI. Great for containerization, great for Kubernetes, great for moving things quickly. There's a million of these tools. Find the one that you're good at. Find the one that you love. Use it. Front-end developers, if we have any front-end developers here, use Lovable. It does really well with generating front ends. Not my thing, but whatever. Deep Agent is really cool. I read a really cool paper on Deep Agent, so I put it in here because I love it. I've never used it, but the paper is really cool. For nerds that like to read white papers, you should. Okay, so now general tools. General tools these you can use on your everyday life, again, as a professional. I'm not saying if you're married, go home to your wife and start summarizing the things that she's saying through your phone and then read it, or, don't do these things. This is like strictly office. But if you're doing a side gig, like you work for big tech, or if you work for small tech and you're doing a side gig, use these tools. They'll help you. They'll help you move quickly. A TLDR is a summarizer. I used to use this. It's really good. Now, because Amazon has mandated summarization through Zoom, which really sucks, it's verbose. Gamma is really great for making PowerPoints. That awesome PowerPoint slide that you guys just saw with the bearded guys, it took 30 seconds to make. Linear is another task project management tool for managing things. If you guys use Jira at all, use Linear. It'll help supplement that. Whisperflow is great with dictation. Now again, your computers probably do dictation. ChatGPT has its own built-in dictation. It sucks compared to Whisperflow. Granola, note summarization, and Perplexity is an alternative to ChatGPT if you want. They've got free plans as well, and they give you free tokens every day, which are deep tokens. Like they allow you to do really complex things. But again, even with your tooling, pick the right model. I can't go into it now because we don't have time. But the reality is that model matters. If you pick the wrong model for the task that you're doing, like Opus 4.1 is really good at rationalizing and writing really complex code. I use it for these types of things. Sonnet 4.5 is okay. Like, get good at these things, guys. This is your value add. You go home at night. I know a lot of you guys go to the gym, or take some of that time and invest a couple of hours 2 times a week, and invest into learning how to do this stuff well and to be well versed in it, please. Real quick, productivity is easily measured, right? Production code, there's a lot of repetitive things that you guys do. Migration, refactors, code reviews, all these things. use AI to help you there. Get 50% of your time back by using these tools, and then learn new things to do, and then empower your team. Like, as a manager, all we want is for you to grow. That's it. Like, I know you guys want promotions, and you want better jobs, better projects, but all we want is to help you grow and to get those promotions as well. If you empower yourself with these tools, you'll be at the top of the pack, right? And that's what we want. This last slide is more satire than anything else. Google Gemini, who works for Google? I saw some Google people here. Google Gemini sucks, man. Let's be honest, like, come on. But longer context windows are good. I got you. Grammarly, Zoom Summarizer sucks unless you throw it into ChatGPT to make it better. Use TLDV if you can. Just real quick, well, I don't know if the internet is gonna work here, but again, context matters. If you're using ChatGPT, I'm not logged in here, as you can see. I don't think we're allowed at Amazon, or we get flagged at Amazon. But if you use ChatGPT, again, log in, let it, like, look, you're using Facebook. They know everything about you anyway, right? Like, don't tell me, oh, my personal data. Log in and build that context. And if you want, supplement that context. You're a Hanafi, okay? Take a good text and embed it in, like, take the whole text, drop it into ChatGPT and say, this is the context that I want to use. I'm the Tasalik, I'll take Reliance of the Traveler as a Shafi'i kind of work log book and drop it here, and I'll say, hey, from now on, give me only references from this book. Like, as a starting point. Don't worry, I'm not talking about making decisions. But the point is, context matters. Over time, you'll see that the responses will get better and better. Okay, I had some fun things, but maybe if we have a specific talk on productivity and things, I can show how to generate images that will help you do things and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, that's good.
Do an image.
Okay, here. Let me bring up, so anyone know Kriya? No? So this is ChatGPT images, Kriya.ai. I need two hands. All right, okay. Show me an Imam who has an awesome beard.
I'm right here.
Playing ball and is good looking.
Aw.
All right, let's generate. All right, so, come on. No, I can't do it on this machine. All right, what the heck? This is for you guys.
He might get fired, but it's for you guys.
All right, let's go. Generate. Oh, look at this go. This got nothing on you, man.
Yeah.
This got nothing.
That's okay.
Nah. MashaAllah. No. Hang on. Let's hold up. We got to make it better. Huh? Yeah. Wearing awesome Egyptian? I can't spell Egyptian. What? Thobe?
I'm wearing Moroccan thobe. I am Egyptian.
No. But thobe in English is what? Galabiya?
No, it's thobe.
Come on, thobe. Oh, there we go. This is solid.
That's not solid.
Look at
That's a Sikh guy.
bro.
That's a Sikh guy.
Come on.
This guy's Buddhist over here, bro.
Look how good this is. Context matters, bro.
Context matters.
So, yeah, and we have history. So, like, the point is that these are, like, this is a joke, obviously, but these tools are there for you to use. So, become familiar with them and get good at them. Add value to your team. There are now jobs, believe it or not, like, I didn't talk about any of this, but there are now jobs being posted for builders, not developers, not, builders. What does that mean? That means they don't know how to code. They don't know a single line of code. But vibe coding is real, and you can build good products, maybe not great products, but you can build good products use vibe coding. Don't shake your head at me. I know what I'm talking about. Trust me. So I can show you 6 or 7 jobs that are posted for, large-ish companies where they are asking for vibe coders. They're actually asking for vibe coders. That's what they want. You can publish an app on the App Store today, the Apple App Store, without writing a single line of code. A single line of code. In 2025, they're actually got their apps in the App Store today that have been generated and are published and people are downloading, and not a single line of code was written. So don't tell, eventually, this is the model we're moving towards. And what that means is that you guys are, you've got a front row seat. So take advantage of it, inshallah. This is a long topic, but that's all I got to say for now. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Yeah, productivity is a whole thing, and I'm really glad we had Dr. Ali here to share with us. If you're in a creative field, to generate images, Kriya is a good tool. The one that I like is Ideogram, or Nano Banana, or some such product. The thing that we didn't cover between the two of us, which I wanted to, is called deep research. If you need deep research on a topic, again, it's really good initial research, right? To try the deep research functionality on Claude. I helped with a workshop on AI for Imams a couple months ago. And in that workshop, we had a running example. Suppose you're teaching a class, how do you do research for the class? How do you use AI to help you do research for the class? And I talked about context. How do you give it a lot of context? How do you give it your own ideas? How do you shape it? How do you go back and forth with it? We covered all of that. And then one thing that I did with that is we were developing a curriculum for teaching, for example, Surah Al-Kahf. And so we'd come up with a curriculum. And then the final step, what I had to do was I had it query the web for other similar courses to see if we'd missed anything. And so it took a few minutes. It took like 5 or 7 minutes, but then it queried like over 300 websites that had curricula for courses on a similar topic, and it said, you know what, this is a good curriculum, it's pretty comprehensive, but I found these other websites that have curricula that add these points that you don't have yet. And some of them were stuff that we wanted to add in, for example. Right, so this is something that we can do manually. I don't have the time to cover 300 websites and to see what's missing. So use it for the things that it's good at, and then check everything. Okay. I think that's mostly what I have. Here's a graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It showed the stock market over time from 2005 up until now, and it also graphed the number of job openings. And you can see that the number of job openings generally pretty closely tracks the stock market, or in this case, the S&P 500. But then, in December 22, it starts diverging. And the number of job openings goes severely down, and the stock market continues its rise up. What happened in December 2022? ChatGPT came out, right? So it's already affecting the job market. It's already affecting our jobs. And if you're not bringing value above and beyond a chatbot, then your job function is at risk. Skip this, summary, so on. I have a couple of memes. I really like this one. Yes, Talal.
Not for me. Again, it's important that you scold your LLM. Like, it's important that, like, confirmation bias is real. You have to tell it off every now and then. You have to tell it, no, you're wrong. Why are you telling me this stuff? What's wrong with you? Like, literally, you have to do these things. I do it daily, and now it doesn't try and please me. You can actually jailbreak your AI if you really want to, and make it remove that confirmation bias, and you can remove a lot of safeguards that make it so much like make it servitude. Like it literally is there as a slave. And by the way, that skews perception, right? That skews people's perception. They expect the rest of humanity to treat them the way the chatbots treat them. So, that's another downside. But the reality is that you should be teaching your your whatever Gen AI tool that you're using, teach it. Like you're using it anyway, and you're expected to use it. But from my perspective, I'm constantly doing that. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, for me personally, but I work in a completely different field. It has given me bad information before, and one of them is the example that I gave, right? So, yeah. Hidayath, anything to add?
Yes, sir.
I'm one of the non-technical people out here, probably the oldest, and I extensively use OpenAI. And there are things that you brought up. It's like a human being. You have to keep talking to it. You have to keep training it for it to make fewer mistakes that it does. And that's exactly right. I think one of the things that makes a difference is having a proper membership account. And that kind of makes there's a more better connectivity when you do that. That's what my experience is. Maybe wrong. I'll give you an example of what I've done. And then I was just kind of in that transition and kind of one job going into another. I just have set up a 451c3 not for profit using OpenAI. It's been registered to the state of Washington. I was going to talk to the Imam as well, and this piece called Heart Safe Mosque Foundation. We'll be putting in defibrillators in every mosque as much as possible. Starting from the state of Washington. Entire job done with AI. Registered with Washington. It helped me draft all the items in operation and everything. I'm a physician. Did everything. It's now, and it took me 6 weeks to get it registered with the federal government. It's all registered. It told me which bank to go to, which bank to avoid basically, which are the charges. It gave me all the tables and everything. I mean, it's unbelievable if the techies don't know about it. It's very disappointing in my
They know, trust me. They're just hiding it. And now we're trying to expose it.
That's what I'm saying. So there it confabulates. But that's getting better. The question I was going to ask you is, I've been using voice recognition for WhatsApp and all of that. I do extensive work, and that's part of it. Anytime I use I'm talking of Islamic terms, mashallah, alhamdulillah, it will make mistakes. It's not very good at doing that. Which is very interesting because I figured that the models have not been trained by Muslims.
So mine doesn't make mistakes, and I'll tell you why. No, it's not your accent. It's actually, if you add the, I've added Arabic localization on my phone, and so it adds the Arabic voices and the Arabic, so then it uses a totally different voice recognition kind of model or engine for Arabic words versus English words, and it changes and intermixes. So when I speak to WhatsApp, for instance, it can detect Arabic versus English, right?
I don't know, that's above my technical.
No, that's fine. You have more knowledge than all of us here. mashallah.
Trying to figure out how best to sort this. These are the kind of things that can help in some
Absolutely.
Because I use that and
Mashallah.
connected and it makes, and what it does is even before you release something, if you're using like a Google, whatever, then it will make those changes when you release it and you realize that it showed you the right thing and then it changed and flipped it over. So you have to be careful. I think these are things which will get better with time.
Inshallah.
These are the things which are relevant to me that you just talked about. I would use it. I have no problem with it. Thank you.
Barakallahu feek.
Oh man, got a lot of questions.
Go ahead.
You're the moderator.
Let the sister ask.
Sister first, yeah, okay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the question is, how do we purify our attention before using like AI tools, correct? Okay. Again, I'm not going to speak from like the tech perspective, because sometimes when it comes to work, our intention is something that isn't necessarily always going to be directly connected to the deen. So if I work at Amazon, obviously working at Amazon is not directly connected to the deen, but I may be working for Amazon in order to provide for my family, and therefore that's how I make my intention pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think the same thing. Just generally speaking, whenever it comes to our daily lives, we want to be in constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's take the knife example that I used, right? If I'm cutting up vegetables or cutting up meat to cook, I'm making the intention, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings that He gave me to be able to use this and have this as a blessing, and then also asking Allah, I'm making the intention that I am being rewarded for cooking for my family, for example, right? And being able to provide for my family. So whatever AI tool we are using, or whatever tools we are using in general in our life, we should be thinking about how this gets me close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does this help people? How does this uplift the ummah? How does this further our cause of Islam, right? Which is very important for us to have that intention, because now a job is not just a job anymore. It has purpose behind it. And it's not something that's just numb, that we're just doing day in and day out. We should always have that purpose, and the greatest purpose that we will always have is وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, and that is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Yeah. Is there a need to create an Islamic authentic AI model, like scholarly approved, worldwide kind of thing? There are efforts that are being done, ones like the Ansari chat. I know there is something called Usul AI, but Usul AI is not recommended to use unless someone's a student of knowledge or scholar themselves, because it's highly technical in that aspect as well. I do think definitely there is a need for that. But again, I'm just going to kind of reiterate what I said earlier. Just be very careful not to use that as your authoritative source. So even today, like, let's not even talk about AI, let's just talk about books. We have a lot of Islamic books, right? Technically speaking, if you haven't studied that book with a scholar, you should never take your reading of that book as authoritative, right? You should never take your reading of that book as authoritative. Now notice my language here, I'm saying your reading of the book. Because scholars, when they write books, there's many different intentions behind writing the book, and without learning with other scholars or studying with other scholars, we may not have the full context of the book. So even like when we were studying any text in madrasa, there would be a whole week of introductions to the book. Who the author was, the context in which he lived, the political climate of the time, because all of that will actually influence the way that you even understand the text. So without that teaching, it's going to be very dangerous. So it's a tool, again, it's a tool that can be used, but I don't think there will ever be a time, and wallahu alam, where the AI will be authoritative. It will just be a better tool, right? It will be a more advanced tool. But what the isnad system is still at the core of our deen, and until a scholar approves of that answer or approves of that text and teaches it or whatever it may be, then we can claim that that was authoritative, right? So that human scholarly aspect still needs to be there. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he even said in the hadith that the scholars are the one that inherits the knowledge of the prophets, right? And the Prophet ﷺ had enough foresight to see until the end of times. And we are not at the end of times, right? So yes, the Prophet ﷺ had enough foresight to know that technological advancements are going to happen, but never attributed the connection of the knowledge to the advancements, always those who are using those advancements and using those tools, which is the scholars. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah, so let's go here. Yeah, here over here. Just real quick before that question's answered. I'm not gonna answer that question, but before the question's answered, I know it's getting late. If anybody needs to leave, like there's no one's holding you here. Like you don't have to stay, right? So we'll be here to answer questions, inshallah, as long as needed. But if it maybe we'll see. So, but but if you have to leave, we understand. We're not going to be offended at all, inshallah.
So, in summary, he said that the real world disadvantages, and correct me if I'm wrong, the real world disadvantages outweigh the advantages of AI or of AI chatbots, etc. And how do we balance that given the top-down mandates and given the push to use it? So let's be pragmatic. It's here. It's not going anywhere, right? Like this is the reality. The reality is that the wave has already more than passed us by. And it's just going to the wave is the tide is just going to get higher and higher, right? You personally, you can balance as you deem fit in your personal life, what you use it for and whatnot. But when it comes to productivity at work, it's going to be instilled in every aspect of work. It's the tool. It's the what is it called? The Swiss Army knife that everyone's going to be using now. It's going to be the first pass. So like Dr. Hidayath said, if you cannot add value to that first pass or give something more, the reality is that you're going to be left by the wayside. So, and I know it's a very harsh thing to think about, but this is the reality of the world that we live in now. So you got to find ways to add that value, whether it's the human element, whether it's something additional, whether it's the use of the tooling that makes it better. You got to get good. This is the reality, right? And it's going to be everywhere. It's everywhere, wherever you look. Now, there are openings, like there in any field, in any new technology or any new advancement in society, the world's possibilities open up. When the computer came out, in the 50s, people thought that, every single administrator at NASA that would sit and calculate things on a piece of paper would be fired. No, they just learned how to use a computer and move on. When the industrial age came and machinery was introduced, instead of men on the line, they used machinery. No, people learned to use that machinery, and then new jobs were created, thousands and thousands of them. So by the same token, AI will replace some jobs. Yes, this is inevitable. But other jobs will be created in its stead.